Today we'll be deciding what is the best budget 7.62 NATO weapon between the RFB and the Vepr Hunter. Ever since the RFB was introduced, the Hunter has been pretty much outclassed on every front, but recently it was given a massive buff to recoil that justifies a second look. The improvement here is on a scale that I have literally never seen before in Tarkov, but that's not to say that it isn't justified. The old recoil was so unnecessarily high that it required an enormous adjustment to get it back in line with the current recoil of other weapons and more specifically the SVT. The old recoil base was 510, i.e. the recoil of just the lower component with no other parts on it, and this was adjusted to 150, which is 70% less, but notably the stocks did get changed a bit as well to offset some of this, so it's not quite as impactful as it looks. Either way, it's a massive difference. Previously, the default Vepr Hunter started life at 311 recoil with the standard stock, and this now sits at 102 instead. There are two main component upgrades to the Hunter, the SVD style stock at 6k from Jaeger 2, removing 4 recoil and improving the ergonomics by 3, and the Hunter suppressor from a Skier 3 Barter, which removes 21 recoil and 28 ergo at the same time. This is available on the flea market, but the Barter is typically cheaper once the early wipe hideout frenzy is over, only costing 1 Nixor lens and an AA battery. These days roughly 30k together. Overall, the Hunter's new best build is 25 ergonomics and 76 vertical recoil, honestly not all that bad from a handling perspective for a budget weapon in this caliber. Do remember though that the return to center time is still the same, so the lower recoil only helps with the height of the initial jump and the controllability when spam firing, not with making the recentering of the weapon itself faster between individual shots. The modded and suppressed Hunter comes to around 84k, with the base gun pricing at 48,000 rubles from Jaeger, but it can often be found cheaper on the flea market to bring this down a bit to 70 to 75ish overall. Compared to the RFB, interestingly the Hunter itself is quite expensive. The base RFB can be purchased from Skier 3 or bartered with Skier 2 in what is a cracking deal. 2 gas analyzers means that you can even get it for under 30,000 rubles sometimes, as they regularly get listed under 15k. This is incredibly cheap. However, getting a suppressor for it is not quite as easy, because it shares its selection with the rest of 7.62 NATO and some 7.62x39 weapons as well. These tend to be a little more expensive. Often the cheapest way to put any suppressor onto it is using the Hybrid 46 Barter via 4 stacks of RAM. If you can get these under 10k, then it's possible to nab it under 40,000 rubles. Just doing this to demonstrate for the moment, we'll add the cheapest vertical foregrip from Peacekeeper, the VFG, which comes to 122 recoil. This is higher ergonomics but worse recoil than the Hunter, but interestingly costs about the same. Clearly, we're unlikely to go for a min recoil RFB, but if we did, this only gets down to 93. This is because of the way that bullpup recoil is handled in Tarkov. The base recoil of the RFB is low compared to other weapons, so the percentage mods have a limited effect and is the main reason why the RFB doesn't scale into the late game, getting outclassed by other weapons in the same caliber. One other cheapish alternative is to use the Raven Barter at Skier 3 for an SRD suppressor and attach the T-lock and 2-port brake alongside the VFG, which comes to 31 ergonomics and 105 recoil. This is typically 40k as well for the muzzle piece combined, and simply comes down to whether you prefer the lower recoil of the SRD or the higher ergo of the hybrid. I also often end up replacing the VFD with an RVG black vertical foregrip, despite the 3 recoil difference probably being unnoticeable simply because it just doesn't cost very much. As a side note, there is one other build that I quite like for the RFB, which is the Loud Blast Mitigation 3-part version. This is high ergonomics alongside 98 recoil, which is one of the better RFB profiles and is fun to use despite being an absolute dinner bell when you shoot it. So here's what the RFB and the Hunter look like side by side using the SRD build versus the fully kitted Hunter. With a single individual shot, the Hunter's recoil profile is actually really nice. The RFB jumps quite a bit more, but as it's faster to come back, they end up being about the same, but overall the recoil feels slightly smoother on the Hunter. Firing as soon as the reticle resets, at least to me, seems to favour the RFB because you can take slightly more shots over the same time, but the difference isn't outrageous. With a full spam fire, the Hunter feels quite a bit nicer as the RFB is a little wild. However, the Hunter's 10 round mag here becomes very obvious. This is one of the biggest downsides to the Hunter that should not be overlooked. 10 bullets is really not a lot, especially if you get caught in a close-ish battle. One unfortunate thing about these magazines is that the 10 rounders are only available on Jaeger 3, which really limits when you can get access to the Hunter in a decent way, and I think that these should be moved back to Jaeger 2, but even then, that is the best that you can do. With the RFB on the other hand, 20 rounders are accessible as soon as you unlock the gun because they're on Peacekeeper 2, and the nice polymer version is on Mechanic 2, so there is really no reason to ever go smaller than this. For solo players, this is a significant disadvantage when playing in a normal way. You can get away with it in a sniping style role, but without backup there will be situations where the 10 rounders and your own aim let you down in combination. We looked at holographics before to compare rather than any scopes, so let's quickly check out some powered optics too. Using something endgame like the Voodoo looks practically the same between the two of them, which is more of a testament to the Voodoo's ability to keep sight picture on pretty much any weapon without eye relief becoming a problem. However, on the Elcan, the Hunter's lighter and smoother recoil becomes apparent. With the RFB, the sight picture blinks out on an individual shot and obscures the screen for a moment, but this doesn't happen with the Hunter, something to bear in mind. In terms of installing these optics in general, although the RFB is simpler due to a single top Picatinny rail, the Hunter is ultimately more flexible through its dovetail mount. For a start, it's not possible to put a flashlight on the RFB. I have shown a way in the past to use a laser only, but you have to go through the odd process of mounting a RaptAR rangefinder to a scope mount Picatinny to make it work. It's also possible to use the Holosun, which has a green laser when you press the change optic mode button, but of course this requires you to use the Holosun rather than any other optic, and it also doesn't give you the point fire bonuses when you have it on. Alternatively, for a flashlight, these days you could always use one on your helmet, which avoids putting it on the weapon altogether, but none of these are as simple as just mounting it on the gun. With the Hunter, you can use the Axion Cobra dovetail mount, which not only gives you a regular rail, but a side mount for lasers and flashlights natively, solving the problem easily. This does come with its own side issues because the largest scopes that can be mounted to the Cobra by default are the Valde and the Elcan, but nothing with rings. That is, unless you use the LaRue riser. Then, you can do what you like, but do beware of the ever-increasing height over bore with this method. This also works on the SKS as well, by the way. One other kooky option is the PSO-1 or the PSO-1M2 plus a red dot, which is enabled by using the TT-01 rear iron sight railed replacement. I advise trying with the Burist Fastfire 3 as it has one of the lowest profiles, so it doesn't clip into the gun scope and means that you can swap between the PSO and the red dot for close range, which is kind of cool, although the left side of your screen is naturally dominated in an extreme way by the PSO when you're in red dot mode. There are some other combinations here if you're really interested, such as the 1P59 mount with the cheap 3 to 10 times scope that also works with these, but ultimately there's a lot more that you can do with the Hunter's optics and attachments than you can with the RFB. So overall, which do I think is the best weapon? Although the Hunter buff appears to make it win over the RFB on recoil, the pricing being relatively similar and greatly enhanced flexibility on optics, the simple fact that the Hunter can only take 10 rounders just means that I can't really use it as a solo player. If you have some backup to cover you when you're out of ammunition, or you're using it exclusively in a sniper capacity alongside a pistol or an SMG, it can be a smooth option at a cheap price, especially considering it's so easily suppressed. But for me, I'll take the downsides of the RFB over the Hunter so long as I can access the 20 round max. Many regular Tarkov fights are lost through attempts to conserve ammunition, and the 20s give you the comfort that you're not going to run out too quickly, which the 10s simply don't do. Before we jump into some clips, it would be remiss not to talk about the ammo itself. This is the main reason why people generally aren't using either of these two weapons, as my prediction that the RFB would be decent in the early-ish game this wipe from Skier 2 was overshadowed by the introduction of the SVT. While LPS and T46M are available from Prep War 2, the best that you can do at Skier 2 and Jaeger 2 is BCP FMJ for 7.62 NATO, and what hurts here is its 35 penetration. That said, FMJ shouldn't be overlooked too much, as with 83 damage, it's like a much harder hitting version of 7.62 by 39 PS. It does surprisingly well against Class 4 armor, generally killing in 3 to the thorax, but it can down players in 2 shots about 1 time out of 5 if you get a lucky armor roll. M80, the ammo that used to make the Hunter and the RFB really good, was moved to Peacekeeper 4 a while back along with M62, which I still think was one step too far. Peacekeeper 3 would have been fine for M80, and that is especially true now, but there is at least a craft in the workbench level 2 for making it technically accessible at level 20. This is an expensive craft, costing the equivalent of 1800 a round, and only provides 80 over 10 hours, so if you do this you'll want to stack the FMJ rounds underneath the M80 in your magazines to avoid running out after a few unfortunate deaths. Once you're at Peacekeeper 4 and can buy M80 or M62, you'll probably be using better weapons like the SR25 or the M1A, but one final thing worth mentioning is about M61. This is still crafter only, but is now locked behind the new shooter born in heaven, so you can't even make it at the tier 3 workbench without getting 5 bolty headshots on every map except for labs and factory. So with that, let's check out a little bit of gameplay with the Hunter and the RFB. 8 outside interchange. Like, we're kind of pushing this fight in a bit of a stupid way. This like greatly increases the chance of me just getting killed because I don't really know where they are. Well, there's somebody dead. This feels bad. This feels really hard to fight into. Oh, I've got no bleed. Oh, I'm dead if he hits my shot. I couldn't see him. Could you see him there in the end? I was like, maybe he's just like hiding for a second. Maybe I hit him and he's healing or whatever. I just like need to run because otherwise I'm going to die. This fight shows the weakness of the Vepr Hunter. You had a bigger mag, you'd have got him. Maybe I did actually run out of bullets. Yeah. Now we're gonna go for a hilarious version of the RFP this time. We're gonna go for the full-on CQB rampage build. Appreciate it. Got him with the cannon! Basically, we're using the 7.62 NATO using the cheap guns. The idea was using the Hunter and the RFB. 7.62 suppressors aren't that cheap. No, I mean that's kind of why I'm using this. I mean, it's not actually the very cheap combination, the BMD. But you can, with the RFB, you can at least get away with using the hybrid. That... I literally can't see. Actually, that might go off too early. Oh! I airbursted myself. Oh, I think we got him. We got helped by the scav. He is dead. I just sort of like, that was a combination of, I think I know where he's going to be, because there's really nowhere else he can be to stop that scav from shooting him. Kind of situation. And it's like, there's a slight grey blob. So we're going to shoot at that. As usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.